Welcome to a special investigation from the Human Error News Network. Tonight, we are digging into a truly catastrophic accident to ask a really simple question. When things go completely wrong, do we look for a person to blame or do we look for a problem to solve?
Because that's the choice, isn't it? Every single time something fails, you can find a scapegoat, point the finger, and close the case. Or you can find a lesson. But here's the thing, you can't do both. And the path you choose, well, it determines whether or not history is just going to repeat itself.
So our investigation kicks off on the Mumbai-Bengaluru highway at a place called Navali Bridge in Pune. It was the site of a horrific multi-vehicle pileup. And, in that chaotic aftermath, the authorities, they were pretty quick to deliver their official verdict. The first headlines that came out were, they were crystal clear. The Hindustan Times reported the cause was simply human error. A nice, simple, tidy explanation for what was a very complex and tragic event. And this story, this narrative, it got reinforced almost immediately. The Regional Transport Office, the RTO, they pointed to overspeeding and driver error. So you can see the case against the person behind the wheel was building fast. It all seemed very, very straightforward. And then came the knockout punch. The really specific, damning detail from the police. The driver had switched off the engine. Switched it off while going down a steep slope. I mean, that's an open and shut case of pure negligence, right? But is that really the whole story? Hang on a second. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one blamed for a mistake, even when you knew deep down that the process or the tools or the whole situation was basically designed for you to fail? It's a hugely frustrating feeling, and it happens all the time. And that gets to the absolute core of the problem. Because when we, as a society, only ask who is to blame, we completely block ourselves from asking the most important question of all. Why did it happen? And if we don't know why, that failure is absolutely 100% guaranteed to happen again. So that's what this investigation is all about, asking why. So let's reopen this case file. To really get what happened here, we've got to zoom out. We need to stop looking at the single driver and start looking at the location itself, the actual stage where this tragedy was set. Just look at this number, 115. That is how many people have died on this exact tiny 7-kilometer stretch of road in just the last 5 years. You see, this wasn't some random one-off accident. This was a deadly repeating pattern. In the world of traffic safety, a place like this actually has a technical name. It's called an accident black spot. It's a formal way of saying that the problem isn't just a string of bad luck or a bunch of bad drivers. No, the problem is literally built into the design of the place itself. Okay, so if we can agree that the location is a huge factor, then we have to go back and look at the driver's actions again. Not to find an excuse for them, but to actually understand them. Let's try to get inside their head for a minute. And that brings us to the central puzzle here, doesn't it? Why on earth would a professional truck driver, a guy whose entire livelihood depends on getting his truck and his cargo safely from A to B, make the seemingly insane decision to turn off his engine on a steep, dangerous hill? It's because they're caught in a horrible, tragic calculation. On one side, you have this massive, terrifying risk of brake failure, of a steering lock, a catastrophic crash. But on the other side, you have intense economic pressure. You have to meet these insane deadlines. And maybe, just maybe, you can save 3 or 4 liters of fuel by coasting. To us, on the outside, it looks like madness. But when you're inside that system, feeling that pressure every day, a dangerous shortcut can start to look like a rational choice. So you know what? Let's put the system on trial. The person has already been blamed. Now it's time to scrutinize the environment, the one that shaped his choices in the first place. It really all begins with simple physics. The highway forces these huge, heavy trucks down a long, steep 5% grade. Now, to control that speed, a driver has to be on the brakes, hard and constantly. But all that friction creates immense heat, and that causes something called brake fade. The brake pads basically get cooked until they become almost useless. And at that point, the vehicle is just an unstoppable force. Physics takes over. And this, right here, is where the story gets truly disturbing. Because this wasn't some hidden, unknown problem. Oh no, the danger was not only predictable, it was known. A survey done years before by the Save Life Foundation explicitly warned the authorities about this exact chain of events. And here's the smoking gun. The report pointed to specific engineering defects in the road and called for long-term fixes. But what happened? Those recommendations were neglected. This tragedy wasn't just foreseeable, it was a documented failure of the system that was just sitting there waiting to happen. So, all of this leaves us with two very different ways to respond to a failure like this. We can play the blame game, or we can build a learning system. Just look at the two futures laid out here. The blame response punishes the driver, suspend their license, hit them with fines, seize their vehicle. It feels like you're doing something, right? But it doesn't change the fact that the road is still a dangerous 5% grade. The learning response is harder. It's more expensive. You reduce the slope. You install warnings. You invest 6,090 crore rupees in a whole new elevated corridor. You actually fix the root cause. So the next time you hear a tragic story get boiled down to just human error, I want you to remember this. The choice to blame the driver of that truck was also a choice to completely ignore the physics of the flawed road they were forced to drive on. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. If this so-called deadly accident was really a predictable design failure, what other human errors are happening in your own life, at your job, in your community, that are really just symptoms of a broken system just waiting for a redesign?